for a lot of it.
Should I hold on, Jeffrey? Literally, Trevor made this whole thing on through AI. Let's see if you guys can hear it.
To the temples on high, we uncover the secrets as the eagles fly by.
Who's singing?
AI.
The journey begins, unlocking the
Turn it up, bro.
where the spirit wins. From
Opening song.
the to the city of light, we're guiding the secrets.
We're guiding the seekers through the darkest night with Jeffery Mann.
The words of the prophets echoing in our soul.
Okay.
To the scriptures, seeking to make us whole. From the plains of America to the temples on high, we uncover the secrets as the eagles fly by. Nothing will be withheld
From them.
for those who seek and strive. With hearts full of truth, we rise again. Inside media, keeping the faith.
David, you need to keep this in.
Okay. Yeah, Trevor made that. I'm going to text you the David the Lion Douglas LP. It's awesome. It's a banger. It's a banger. It's literally a banger. Let's get started. Welcome in to, and hopefully we keep that first part in where we're jamming out to the Zion Media theme song. Another Kia David podcast. This is the 90th podcast that we've done. We are on day 90. We're doing 100 long form videos in 100 days, spreading and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ in the most unique way that we can think of. I'm joined by Trevor the Key Keys and David the Lion Douglas, and we got Jeffery the man, because he is the man. And we love Jeffery Mann. We're going to be talking today about some interesting topics, like, I don't know, blacks in the priesthood, racism in the church, nothing too crazy. But we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the first being the last and the last being the first. And maybe the leaders of the end days are maybe looking a little different than you might expect. And so I'm excited. Jeffery, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Super excited. You guys came on my podcast. We were able to connect and talk and go over some topics. So I'm excited to return the favor and see what we can talk about.
And just to promote your show, it's Man on a Mic. Do you have a YouTube channel or is it primarily like Instagram?
So it's actually, last week we're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all platforms now. Every week we'll have a long form podcast that comes out. The shorts are on Instagram. So just authentic, unscripted conversations and having fun with the guests.
That's awesome. Hey, the spirit is strong with Jeffery Mann. I've met him in person. Before we jump into some of the deeper topics, I think it's important that we discuss kind of, you're adopted, I'm adopted. But let's discuss kind of your origin, where you came from. How did you, I want people to know who you are, and then we'll get into some of the deeper topics. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. So I was born in Prince George's County, Chevrolet, Maryland, on the border of Maryland and DC. At 3 weeks old, I was adopted to a family out of Boise, Idaho. And so moved to Idaho. When I was 7 and 8, my dad was retired and did humanitarian work. So we moved over to Zimbabwe and Africa for 2 years. I was actually baptized in Zimbabwe. When I was 8, we moved back, went to school in Idaho. When I was in middle school, my dad was called as the LDS mission president. So then we moved back to South Africa, lived there for 3 years, kind of a new culture over there, all boys school, uniforms, learned to play rugby, didn't have American football. From there, moved back to Idaho again, went to a school called Parma, small town school, graduating class of 75, first black kid in the school, first black kid in school history. And, with that comes its bumps and
class of 05?
No, so I graduated in 2011.
2011, okay.
Yeah. And so, came with the ups and downs. And I wish I was young. I feel old. I actually shaved my head and my beard now because you can't see the gray hair. But, we got to stay young.
Wrong.
Exactly. Moved to Utah, went to a semester of school at Utah Valley, and then went on my LDS mission to Ghana, this part, West Africa, for 2 years. And then I've been in Utah since 2014.
And you're not married right now.
Nope.
So, ladies, and I'm really speaking to our demographic of the 55 and olders. I know you have grandkids that are his age, and it's time to make the connection. So let's make this happen for him. Okay.
Man for you.
That's right. That's right. That's the best. Hey, the best is when you get grandma in the middle of it and she puts the deal together. So let's make that happen for Jeffery Mann. Okay. So you've started this podcast into, kind of that LDS creators and LDS content creators. What caused you to want to go ahead and jump into that?
Initially I was trying to start my social media, and I was doing like talking heads and me lecturing and talking about work and stuff, and was doing that. And it just didn't feel right. It felt awkward. It wasn't authentic. And so I had a few buddies in the space, and I said, hey, let's do some reactions. Let's talk about some topics, and started doing that. And one of our videos, it blew up. We had 900,000 views, and it continued to grow. Yeah, I started to see, hey, if I'm having conversations with people and talking about topics that I'm passionate about, people love that and they tune into that. And so I kind of leaned into that and kind of shifted from just me talking to having different guests and then bringing up topics and talking about things that were relevant and current. And it's continued to grow. And what's fun for me is I was down in St. George 2 weeks ago, and a kid stopped me at the gym and said, hey, are you Jeffrey? I just got off my mission. I see your podcast. I love your stuff. It's helped influence me. This morning when I was at the gym, another kid stopped me. Hey, are you Jeff? I go to BYU. I follow your stuff. So the fun thing for me is as it gets out there and it's influencing people, it helps me to keep pushing and going, but also to push the boundaries. I think the other side of going into it was I realized, hey, I'm a Black male in Utah. I'm going to push the boundaries and push the topics because I'm one of the hardest groups to cancel. And so I'm like, let's lean into this and let's see what happens.
Why do you think we have David on the pod?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I love it. But I think, I think it's crucial, and it's stuff that people are talking about, but sometimes they're too afraid to talk about in the open.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm just going to address it and hit it head on. And guess what? If you like what I have to say, great. If you don't, you don't have to listen. I'm not forcing you to listen to.
So let's dive into that topic. I got called on my mission to South Africa. I had to address this with people. Let's talk about Blacks in the priesthood. Let's talk about the origin, because the Blacks did have the priesthood when Joseph Smith was around. I know several people that had the priesthood. Let's talk about Joseph Smith running for president in 1844. And part of what he was running on is to free all the slaves long before Abraham Lincoln came around. But let's talk about racism in the church. Let's get into this stuff. But how do you approach that when somebody finds out that you're Mormon, you're Black, or they like, hey, isn't that church racist?
That's the biggest thing I get. I don't even know how you could be a member. There's a lot of racism. They don't like Black people. They've treated you a certain way and everything. And for me, personally, I choose to focus on here's the things that I know will save me, and here's the things that are important. But what I've done through studying and understanding scriptures and how things have worked, I've kind of explained to them the order, or I try to give them some scripture references that they can pull from and help understand. And the hard thing I always have is some people are just looking to start an argument and a fight and not willing to have a dialogue. And I'm like, if you want to talk about Blacks in the priesthood and you're willing to have a dialogue, you can have a meaningful conversation and learn some things. But when they're just looking to poke the bear, it doesn't really get anywhere. And so for me, it's understanding, are these the right people to address this with? Are they not? And if so, let's have a good conversation about it.
Yeah, you got to find out if they're just looking to pick a fight. You can tell pretty quickly, right? If they're just looking to lock horns, or if they're actually sincerely looking to have that combo.
Yeah.
Now, have you done much work in understanding in the early days? Now, I just spent a weekend with Alex Boyer. We went down, we did a fireside down in St. George, and he's actually producing an entire play called The King of New York, which is about Joseph Smith. And the Blacks that were those that were African American descent that were involved with Joseph Smith in the early days of the church and telling their story. Do you have any insights? Have you done much work or any research on the early days of the church when Joseph Smith was around?
I haven't done a ton, but what I do know is, there was obviously a shift from Joseph Smith, who was ordaining the priesthood to blacks at the time and everything. And then after he was killed, there was some type of shift with Brigham Young, and that no longer was happening and everything. And so that's what I know.
Just a function of culture. Do you think that was just a function of the times that were going on, and not necessarily a revelation or anything like that?
So here's the thing I've always said is, if you look at all the revelations that's been received in the church, it can be found in the back of the scriptures. Now, there was a revelation that blacks should receive the priesthood, but I've never, ever once found anything in writing on a revelation given to Brigham Young that, hey, the blacks should not receive the priesthood at the time. And because of that, I'm always like, okay, everything else that has happened, it's been seen, it's in writing, we understand the time, when it happened, everything. There's nothing to be found based off just what one person said and started to do, and then that was followed on. And so that's one thing that's always bugged me, is I'm like, okay, why did that shift take place? Was it because history at the time, or was it because, you had someone leading the church, but then at the same time, the gospel may be perfect, but the people are not?
Yeah. So do you think, ultimately, do you think it was a mistake that maybe was made in the early days of the church where they didn't allow this, and it was just a mistake that man makes because man is man, and man is influenced by the times and seasons that we live in and the cultures that we have? Do you think it was a mistake?
I think it was partly a mistake, but also I think it was based off fear that, hey, look how already we're being prosecuted. Now we start allowing blacks to be a big part of this church, of this gospel, everything. It's going to make it 10 times worse for our people. And so there was a sense of, hey, let's protect our own people and not deal with this and not have that extra issues. And it's the same thing that you saw with polygamy.
Correct.
So how do you get over that? Like, I can't imagine, being black, and I've had to get over my Brigham Young issues. And I had 2008, 2009, I went down this, black hole of just uncovering all of this Brigham Young stuff. And it rocked my testimony more than about anything did. Right. And I can't imagine, putting myself in you or David's shoes or anyone who's black. How do you get over that aspect? Is it just pure forgiveness? Is it grace? How do you swallow that pill? Because it's such a blight on our church and everything that we did, up to 1978.
I think I have to look at it from the standpoint. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Brigham Young fan. Never have, never will be. But I do look at, and I know Shane was in South Africa, but I played rugby in Cape Town, and there was a time where we were able to go and visit Nelson Mandela's prison where he was kept for 27 years. And I look at, what his life and what he went through. And if he was able to come out of that and to forgive people, then there's a level to which we have to forgive, but there's also a level to when you do forgive, it alleviates some of the stress and the weight that we find on our shoulders. And so it's a balancing act of, we do need to forgive, but also there's some stuff that we just can't forget.
I have to just chime in too. I imagine it's probably expected I'd say something on this. But the fact is when it really comes down to it, it's the Book of Mormon. I mean, when you take the time to actually read the Book of Mormon and you ask God to know if it's true or to understand the text. I mean, and for me personally, when I learned that blacks didn't always receive the priesthood or didn't have the access to the priesthood, for me, it was like a 2-second realization that, oh, well, blacks didn't always receive the priesthood, but the Book of Mormon is true. And I say that way because I've had a personal revelation witness. And in case others don't know, I was brought to this church because of a dream that I'd had and because of a prayer asking God to put me where he wanted me to be. So when the Book of Mormon's in play, it just, it matters to many people that blacks didn't always receive the priesthood. But when it comes down to it, it's still like the Lord still chose to build or restore an organization, a church, with the Book of Mormon.
So David, let me push back on that, okay? Just for fun of convo. Like, the Bible's true, right? And you look at what the different popes have done, and through all the different movements of the Catholic Church, like, couldn't the Catholic take that same position, being like, well, it doesn't matter that we change this and we change that and we apostatize because the Bible's true.
Yeah. I mean, I in my response to that is there is no determinate, like no one can force a person to follow. Nobody can tell you that, okay, you have to accept Joseph Smith, you have to accept Brigham Young, you have to accept all of these other things. My logic was that when I got my witness of the Book of Mormon, I was like, well, that must mean that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and that I could trust everything that came from this church. That was my logic as a 15-year-old. But I've learned since, and in fact, I had on my mission, which was in Ohio, I met a lady who I could tell had the Spirit with her. The Spirit was directing her. It was a black lady too, and she was taking care of a lot of kids in her home, but she wasn't coming to church. And I was like, how could the Spirit be with this person that isn't necessarily following every single thing to a T? And that's when I realized, if the Spirit is with her, and then that means the Lord is blessing her, and that we all can have our own individual paths. And, at some point, at some day, everything is going to be made right. And so it's okay. Yeah. You don't have to be going to church every single day. But, at some point, the Lord's going to make everything right. And it's just about being patient at that.
Do some of you guys go to church every single day?
I'd say I probably make it more often than not for myself.
Well, one thing I found interesting is I don't know why I was on this, but I was reading through this really cool breakdown of 1978 and how President Kimball ended up getting this to pass. And I think a lot of people are under the understanding that there was a revelation given, right? We're like, oh yeah, there was a revelation given that now blacks can be in the priesthood, and that's been promulgated and talked about quite a bit. But there was never a revelation given. And if you go back and you read and study it, and I believe there was never a revelation given because God was like, dude, there was never a revelation that needed to be given. You guys never should have, not given it to him in the beginning. But what happened is, and Kimball has this in his personal diaries that are in, I believe they're in BYU library right now. His son wrote about this as well. And his son told him, he says, I can't get everyone on board. And as you know, the Q15, they have to be unanimous on all of this. And there was a 4-year struggle where Kimball kept bringing this up, being like, we really need to do this. And he had, I won't mention the ones that were against it or for it, because I don't want to throw anyone up.
Conky.
But there were a few hardliners that were like, absolutely not. We're not doing this. And he told his son, he says, I fear that I'm going to have to fake a revelation to get some of these guys on board. Now, he never did that. He never faked it. What ended up happening is they kept getting closer and closer. There was 2 holdouts. They ended up going to the temple, the Salt Lake Temple, and there was, they did a prayer session, and all of them were in the Holy of Holies. They got together, they did a prayer, and there was a outpouring of Spirit. And, everyone in the room was just like, the Spirit was so strong, it was so intense that it was just universally decided that, like, yes, this is the right thing to do. But, I've talked to a lot of my friends. I'm like, do you know that there wasn't a revelation? And, and I strongly believe, beforehand and afterwards, or even that, there wasn't a revelation because they didn't need to give a revelation. It never should have been withheld.
Well, and if I may, I think one of the things I've always told people is no matter what the apostles or the prophets say, you always need to pray about it and get your answer from God if you believe it's true. Because if you look through all the apostles, you could go back and go through the rabbit hole and see, I mean, stuff that Bruce R. McConkie said in the past, stuff that Boyd K. Packer said in the past. I mean, there's all things that have been said, that have been pulled, that have been removed. There's apostles who've spoken at conference who've been excommunicated and the stuff have been pulled. And so it's even like during the pandemic when the prophet posted a picture of getting a vaccine and everyone started to rush and get vaccines. I'm like, well, have you prayed about it yourself? And, you know, it's a thing that worries me about, and what we've seen with even bishops who end up, you know, who have sexually assaulted kids, then they had to shift it to where, hey, now interview someone sitting outside. Hey, parents, now you can go with your kids. Because what happened was people are putting so much faith in these religious leaders. They're like, no matter what they're saying, it has to be true. No matter what, you know, no matter what's happening. Hey, this feels wrong, but it's a religious leader, so it must be the right thing to do.
Yeah,
and
putting the trust in the flesh, right? In the arm of the flesh instead of the spirit, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What do you guys say? There's a lot of people, and maybe Trevor, you can chime in on this. I've heard a lot of people say, well, in 1978, the reason why they did this is because they were going to lose their 501c3 tax-exempt status. Is there any truth to that?
There wasn't threat of the 501c, but what they were doing is the NCAA was coming after BYU.
NAACP, you mean?
No, the NCAA. The NCAA was coming after BYU. They were going to kick BYU out of the NCAA for all of their sporting events. The second thing that was going to happen is BYU, the National Bar Association, was threatening to take away BYU's law license. So those were two huge moves that, you know, would have really, you know, segregated the church from themselves, and so that was a very, very big pressure point. That was happening in 76, 77, and they were fighting nonstop to not get kicked out of the NCAA and the National Bar.
It's wild to see the government keeping the church in check.
I know not too long ago the church came out with a statement, and it felt like an apology to me. Jeff and David, are you guys familiar with, I think it was 2016. I don't know, Trevor, if you could find that statement and pull it up. Are you guys familiar with that?
When they gave the donation to the NAACP, and it wasn't an apology. There was a lot of people that were like, that's the weakest apology I've ever heard. It was an apology without saying I'm sorry.
So we have another guest that's been on several times. His name's Lance. You can go to his site. One of the things he is saying, and he's an active member of the church, but he is saying that the church needs to issue an official apology. Now, as two guys of African descent, would that do anything for you? Do you think that the church needs to do that, or are you past it and it's just like, let's move on?
Well, to me, the biggest thing would be to be at a general conference and see them call a black apostle. I think that would go further and longer than any written apology that's words, because words are one thing, but now if we put it into action.
Do you know Elder Johnson? Elder Johnson of the 70?
Yes, I've always thought that he would be the first one after that.
He's the darkest man I've ever seen, and he was in my ward. He lives literally a quarter of a mile from my house. But I have had this feeling as I've interacted with him that this guy's going to be an apostle. I've had that.
I remember his first talk when he, that the Baptist came out and every day, just the way that he spoke. And I'm like, this is interesting, because I hate to say I love the African apostles, but they just bore me. But the Elder Johnson, I was just like on the edge of my seat.
So David, what about you? Would an apology go? So Jeffrey's taking the stance that doesn't need an apology, but if apostle would be called, it'd be like,
oh yeah, totally. Like I'm right with Jeffrey on that. I think it'd be. I keep thinking it's like when people saw Obama being finally president. People were celebrating. and they were just celebrating because the line had finally.
It was a big moment for the world, really.
It was
I don't care what you think about Obama. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, and I told my buddy the other day, I said, look, this whole Kamala Harris thing, whatever political affiliation, it's the first black is gone. I mean, back then, Obama could have said anything, and I was going to vote for him. It didn't matter what he said or he did, but in that moment. And so in moments like that, it's like people gravitate to it and stuff. But I've always thought to myself, if a black apostle would call, will more minorities join the church? But how many white members are going to leave?
I think we're past. I think we're past that. Like,
that's a good question, though.
Yeah,
and you know what? They should leave. If that's what it is, then go. Yeah. Go, because that's not Christ Church. You don't belong to Christ Church. Go. I believe that the first should be the last and the last should be the first. And I believe, because I have been to the Deep South Baptist churches, and those people know how to worship. Those people love the Savior in such a way. And I desire to have that same kind of love and worship inside of me. I'm learning from them. I do believe the last should be the first and the first should be the last. And so I love where you guys are coming from. Now, it's still like you guys are definitely the minority of the minority, but the church is growing significantly in Africa. What do you guys, and Jeffrey, you lived out there. What's going on with Africa right now? You served your mission there. Why is it that so many people on that continent are joining the church in droves?
I think the difference is they don't have the material things that we have here. The focus is not on electronics or fancy houses or fancy cars. They're people who care, and when they receive the gospel and they understand this is going to bless my life. When I look at the families that save up for months and years, to travel and to go to the temple. You come to Utah and you have a temple on every street and people don't go. And so I just think there's people are focused about different things in Africa than they are in first world countries.
David, you got any thoughts? Like, why are so many? Now, what's interesting is it's not like in America, we aren't having Baptists join the church in droves, but we're having Africans in Africa join the church in droves. So it's a really interesting thing that's happening right now. Why, David?
What I wonder is what would have happened if the church put an emphasis on Africa earlier on, and would it be growing the way it is today? And I sometimes hear stories of people finding the gospel in different countries like Africa, where they message or write letters to the church asking for more resources, and the church didn't make it really as much of a priority. Those are the things that kind of come to my mind a little bit, but I just, I think it's because, like you're saying, I think there's a lot of synchronicity or lineup with what you're saying. The first shall be the last and the last shall be the first. I think that Africa is going to be a huge part of the church as we get closer to the last times.
Okay. Jeffrey, any other thoughts on that?
I just have to say, I have to agree. And this is a church of constant growth. And I think the other thing you have to remember is the church hasn't been in Africa as long as it's been in America. And so there is some time to make up.
But Shane, you're right. The baptism numbers, when you look at the current baptism numbers, it's similar to what was happening in the 80s and 90s in South America. Like, we are just growing over there, like incredible numbers. Like, it's dwarfing all the other continents. Pretty cool to see.
So you're really a minority. You're a black dude in Utah that's a member of the church. Jeffrey, and you've been out there in the world. I mean, you, for a living, you're in PR. Yeah. Do you have much interaction with people that are African Americans that aren't of our faith? And then when they meet you and they learn you are they like, hey, brother, well, like what's going on here? Do you have any of that?
No, I get that quite a bit. And, I just have to explain, here's my principles. Here's what I stand for. Here's what I believe. and help them understand these are the guiding things that I live by. And, they respect that and they honor that. And, I don't go into too many details of everything, but I also don't shy away from my faith and my beliefs.
He's got the hiccups.
You got to hear
The hiccups.
Let's do a quick little transition while you're kicking the hiccups. So David taught me a while ago.
Do you know how to kick the hiccups? Hold on. I'm gonna teach everybody right here. Do you know how to kick the hiccups?
I do.
Okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna take 3 deep breaths. You're gonna go 3 deep breaths, and on the third one, you're gonna hold it. And I'm gonna say Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin. Okay, when you hold it, let me know. 3 deep breaths. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin. Don't let it go. Hold it as long as you can hold it. Let's see how long you can go. If you hold it, the hiccups are going to kick. You're not going to have them anymore. No more hiccups are going to happen. Rumpelstiltskin's in the building, making sure that those hiccups.
I don't know about this Rumpelstiltskin business, Shane, but we've never talked about this before. This is exactly how I cure my hiccups. I don't do the 3 breaths out. I hold my breath as long as I can until I almost pass out. Gone.
Is he still holding his breath?
Yeah, keep doing it, bro. He's a diver. You can tell.
That was amazing.
He's a
okay. And if anybody wants to know how you get rid of the hiccups, there it is. No hiccups. They're gone. It's that easy.
My mom drinks water upside down, and I don't know if it's psychoschematic, but for her it works. Okay, so let me get back into this thing that David taught me. David, I actually want you to break this down, because how can a white guy teach a brother thing? Teach us what you guys do when you see each other in public, particularly in Utah, because it's rare that you run into another brother in Utah. So give us the rundown, David.
Okay, yeah. Well, and I'm sure Jeff has definitely experienced this. When 2 black guys, okay, this is crazy. Okay, I don't know if other white folks ever think this way, but when I see a black person, I say, oh, a black person. I'm sure there's plenty of white folks that do that, but
no, we don't.
Well, okay, wow, okay, well, maybe. Anyway, well, I'll see a guy in the grocery store or out and about, parking lot, and when we are about to cross paths, I usually just do the head nod, and they always will do it back, and it literally sends a signal like we are speaking telepathically, like, hey, we know that we're like the only black people in this vicinity, and there's pretty much no black people in the rest of the state of Utah. We just have this understanding as we pass by. And sometimes I'll stop and talk to somebody. And I actually did at a Macy's in Provo. And this guy I said, hi, how you doing? Being around Shane, he's kind of rubbed off on me. He talks to everybody. So I wanted to talk to this black guy. And I was about to walk away, and he came back to me and he said, you know what? Thanks, man, for talking to me, because most of the time when I see other black guys or other black men, they always just do the head nod, and then that's it. So it confirmed that other black people, when I'm not around, are doing the head nod, and they pass by, say nothing. Sometimes if I see a nerdy black guy, they won't even acknowledge the head nod. But other than that, that's kind of the experience.
Well, I can tell if it's a black guy from Africa or an African American.
Totally.
Because the head nod or not the head nod, and then based off the handshake, I can tell.
So wait, do the people from Africa not do the head nod? They don't know?
No, and I can tell somebody that's from Africa like this, and somebody that's an American like this. I know it.
Why?
Like
they don't have swagger. They're like,
no. It's not even that. I don't know I can't even describe it. I just know.
Sure. I'm gonna say it. Yeah. There's an African in my ward. We were talking about this past week, and his name's Blessing. Awesome guy, and he doesn't see color. And so we were discussing this in my driveway. He came by to visit, and we just had this full on discussion about what it's like being black in America. He's actually experienced a lot of racism living in Utah, in Utah County especially. And he's blown away. Well, and he grew up his mother joined the church, so he grew up in the church. And in Africa, the church in Africa is amazing, but it's because of the culture. The American culture is really what really ruins it, mainly for him. And growing up with my grandmother, I'd hear her talk. And just so you know, my grandmother's Cuban Jamaican. And so I'd hear her talking about America and her distaste for Americans and how they do things and how they operate. And I can totally get it from my friend Blessing. Just the American culture really ruins it. Because when an African looks out for his brother, they don't call or text. They go over to the house and say, "Hey, we missed you at church, brother," or they spend time with them. And Blessing treats me the same way as he would another African. He doesn't call or text me. He is pretty busy going to school, but he literally comes to my house, knocks on the door, checks to see how I'm doing. I go out, we have a full-on conversation, and I try to do the same thing for him. If I haven't heard from him in a while, I'll go to his house, and if he's not home, I'll talk to his wife, let him know that we care about you. It's a total
Jeffrey, I want to talk about Brad Wilcox. A couple years ago,
before we transition to Brad Wilcox, I gotta teach something to all the brothers out there that are watching. Okay, this is some of this white secret stuff that we normally.
Oh yeah, teach him the white secret stuff. Yes.
What is this? Mayonnaise and potato salad, or what is it?
No. This is way. I know exactly where he's going. Teach him, Trevor.
Okay, so when us white people, when we have a similar head nod thing, but it's a little different. Anytime that you're on a regular road, if it's paved and you drive by and you see someone, you don't wave. Okay, you don't acknowledge, you don't do anything. The moment that you're on a dirt road, okay, and you're camping and you're driving, anytime that you drive by someone, you got to do that. You got to take one hand off the wheel and you got to give them one of these things. On a four-wheeler, same thing. You're driving, you see another person, you got to give them one of those things. It's the moment you're off of a paved road, the rules in play, okay, and you have to do it. Just so you guys know.
I'm glad Jeffrey mentioned the mayonnaise. Okay, I've been trying to teach these guys, Jeffrey, about mayonnaise and how that's messed up. And here, I'm just glad that you actually said something.
Jeff, do you like mayonnaise or no?
No, Miracle Whip.
David, is Miracle Whip in your thing?
I did have a moment where I switched to Miracle Whip, and now I just don't touch both. I won't go. No fry sauce either. Okay, no fry sauce for me.
What about fry sauce, Jeffrey? No fry sauce?
I live in Utah County, so it's fry sauce.
Let's go.
They make converted.
So Shane, I got to ask you, if you're like, hey, I want to get some chicken today. Do you go to like KFC?
Popeyes.
Well, truthfully, it depends on where I'm at, but I like Bojangles if I'm in the South. But if I'm here and I want chicken, gosh, it's probably like Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A salt.
Okay. Dave's Hot Chicken. I'm on a Dave's Hot Chicken trip right now.
Yeah.
What about you?
Is it Popeyes or Dave's?
It's not KFC.
It's not KFC. KFC is just breading.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's move into the Brad Wilcox. There are some people that might not be aware of what happened, but Jeffrey, give us a little breakdown of kind of what happened with that Brad Wilcox thing. And,
real drama here.
From what I remember, he was giving a devotional in Highland, Utah, and he was talking about blacks in the priesthood. And his statement was, our focus should not be on why blacks didn't receive the priesthood, but why did whites not be able to receive the priesthood, and was going back to the Bible and ancient times and everything. And then it was almost like a disregard of, this doesn't matter. Let's focus on white people and oh my gosh, what happened to us. And so
not good.
Yeah.
What did you think when you saw that as a black member of the church?
I thought this man's an idiot, but it was, I didn't agree with the statement because I felt like you can't sweep something under the rug and then try to focus on something else to cover it up. I'm like, let's address the topic that's at hand. And I'm like, if you're even going to go to the topic, you better address it. It's rather talk about something else if you don't want to talk about it. But just
and it was very animated. It was almost kind of like awkward for me to watch him because he was very animated when he was doing it. And it was a train wreck. And I'm sure we'll cut it in here and put it in here so people can see what we're talking about. But it sounds like he also probably recognized maybe I messed up there. And you have somebody that you were talking about when we were doing our pre-show, a new convert that just joined the church. Are you friends with him? Can you tell us anything? I don't know how much he would want you to tell, but tell us a story.
So he came out here to work the BYU basketball camps and met some buddies, some of his roommates, and met the missionaries. And like 4 weeks later, he opted to get baptized. And, you know, for me, that was an interesting baptism because I've never seen a baptism Provo with so many people that showed up. The coach came, an Area 70 came, 1 million white women came. I mean, it was just this.
Hey, you guys don't realize the power you have to get chicks like in Utah. I tell all my friends that are black guys that don't live here, and I was friends with a bunch of guys that played for the Utah Jazz, like Darren Williams and Carlos Boozer and a bunch of these guys. And they're like, the whole NBA knows this too. They're like, yeah, Utah, there's not a lot going on, but the women, number one, they're like super gorgeous and they love the chocolate. And that's what they would tell me. And so I don't know if that's been David, you're married, Jeffrey is single. I don't know if that has been your experiences, but sounds like they all showed up at his baptism too.
I was pretty popular in the college days.
Mm-hmm.
Just say that.
And so, you know, he gets baptized, and then my buddy's like, yeah, it's been fun. They've been having me go and talk to all the different BYU classes. And then he met Brad Wilcox. And then I just felt it interesting that Brad Wilcox then posted a picture of them together and a long post about him and was like really pushing it on his social media. And, you know, me in the field of PR, I'm like, is this someone who genuinely cares, or is this a PR stunt?
What do you think? As a PR guy,
I think it's a complete PR step because I'm like, within this whole, you cannot tell me no other black person has not been baptized in the past year or so, and this is the first time he's posted something about it. But also, I'm like, okay, let's say an Asian kid got baptized or a white kid got baptized. Why didn't you take a picture with them and shout them out?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, hopefully,
you got a black friend.
Hopefully, Brad Wilcox can come on your show. I think it'd be really cool for you to have a conversation with him about what happened 2 years ago. I think, and I don't know, did he ever come out and apologize and say, "Hey, I messed that up. I shouldn't have done that"? I don't know.
He didn't, but the church issued a statement just about race and stuff that was on the end. I'll send you guys the clip, but it was also on like KUTV, the local news ran it and stuff.
In response directly to that, or did they just post it?
It was within the same time window, so I'm like, it had to have been in response to it.
Yeah.
And then they, you know, I had tried to reach out to his office, and they completely cut his communication to anybody. And those that I know that like were in his classes at the time, he wasn't at class for a few days and stuff, so they completely kind of tried to quiet things down.
So Brad Wilcox, if you're tuning in, or you're going to go ahead and take it. I know where you're going. Yeah, let's tell our people in the suits what to do.
Exactly. Let's get this text. Those of you who are watching this, send this link to Brad Wilcox. Give him the timestamp where we're talking about this. Let's give him the opportunity to bury this hatchet, right? And what better opportunity to do it than go on the Man podcast and talk about this? Because clearly Brad's got a good heart. Obviously, he's up there trying to talk about a difficult subject, and he's, you know, over his head in water. And so let's give Brad an opportunity.
And the truth is, when I was in prison, I got sent, and you should all read this, totally inspired by the Spirit. It's a talk Brad Wilcox gave on grace. It's one of the best talks on grace that I've ever read. And so I hope we can give him some grace, but I also hope that Brad is authentic in his approach. I would love to see more people apologize when you've messed up. Time to apologize. That's okay. It's not a weak thing to do to say, you know what? I screwed up. We do it all the time when we go to the bishop, when we repent of our sins. We apologize to the Lord. Sorry, I messed up. And sometimes we need to make restitution. And I think it would go a long ways for an official apology. I think it would go a long ways. Not just the church saying, oh, sorry. Him personally. It wasn't the church that did it. It was Brad Wilcox that did it. But we should also extend him grace. Jeffrey, any other thoughts on that?
I actually, this is a completely separate topic. I wanted to pivot, but I wanted to capture your guys' attention and ask you a question on your guys' thoughts on the new show coming out, The Secret Lives of Mormon Housewives.
Okay.
And I don't know if you guys are available next week, but I actually, several other LDS creators, I'm trying to set up a watch party.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna do.
We were thinking about doing that. My wife wants to do it. Yes, let's do it as a bigger group. I think that's an amazing thing.
Really?
But Trevor, do you want to talk about what you think? I know we've talked privately between Trevor and my wife and I about this.
Yeah, I think that we're giving them power by getting upset about it, right? Like they're to the place in their lives where they've decided to take this path. And, like to me, when I see this, it doesn't get me angry. Like, I'm not just like, that's not how Mormons are. Like, you see these people like on TikTok and Instagram, they're just getting into these fit rages, right? Well, by doing that, you're becoming offended. You're allowing yourself to be offended by their actions, and they're winning. The adversary is winning. Like, don't be offended by it. That's my opinion. Like, don't be offended by it. These guys are taking a bath. If anything, this is like a train wreck. It's like a car wreck that we get to watch happen. These people ruin their lives. They ruin their covenants. They ruin their marriages, right? And, it's a telltale sign of hey, be careful what you wish for. Be careful the people that you interact with. Be careful the decisions that you make. And we have friends and peers and people that are in those same age groups. And I've had people that are in my peer groups that have screwed around with things like that. And the same inevitable events happen. Their lives are destroyed. Their marriages are destroyed, right? And so my take on it is like, let's watch this train wreck happen. Let's watch these people's lives get ruined and destroyed, and don't give them the power of being offended, because that's what they want. They want to offend us. They want to rub this in our face. They want these views to go to the sky. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
Well, Trevor, if I may, and being in the PR world, I'm not sure if you guys have been in Utah County lately, but if you look, like a few of the girls on the show, one runs like a hair salon. Well, suddenly, if you look at the billboards getting off the freeway by the colleges, she's bought a bunch of the billboards to promote her hair salon. So they're going all in on, hey, this show's going to get me viral. Now let me send it. How can I generate business from it?
Yeah, the hair salon
you can really see.
Name.
Yep.
By right.
But Dave, you pointed that out to me. You're like, read that out loud.
Yeah, it's a really weird one. Right when you come into Orem,
right off the UVU
University.
What do you think? What do you think, Jeffrey? I mean, you're like, listen, dude, I'm like I'm a 44-year-old guy. I don't really know the tic tac and that kind of thing. But you're, younger than me. How does this play into your world? Because you're really involved on the Instagram and on the tic tac.
I got to be honest. Here's what I'm excited about the show. There is not a black person in sight. And so I'm not stressed, because my biggest fear was, if you had a black person on the show, that would be the whole thought process. Oh, this is what black people are like in the church. And so because there's not, I'm like, I don't have to stress. I can eat my popcorn, sit back, watch, enjoy, have a laugh, and just watch idiot to the idiot.
Yeah. And I guess this shows you when you make those covenants, and then you choose to abandon those covenants, it says in the temple, and I quote, Satan says, you will be in my power. And that is the truth. If you would be better off not making covenants in the temple that day than making covenants that day and not keeping them. And while they might have their 5 minutes of fame, trust me, destruction will come to their doorstep. And it already has. It does in their relationships. And they pretend or they think they're happy, but they're not really happy. They don't really have peace. They got drama. They got fear. And so it is a train wreck. It's going to be an interesting one. The question is can we use this to our advantage? Just like the Book of Mormon play. That's the way I look at this. The Book of Mormon play went out. It goes viral. And then the church capitalizes on it by saying the book is much better than the play, right? So we need to be creative as true members of Jesus Christ Church and figure out how we turn this thing that potentially could be a negative thing into a positive thing to where we can share the gospel, because there are going to be a lot of people that aren't members of our faith that are going to see this. So how can we capitalize? How can we use Satan's tool to spreading, truth? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe Jeffrey, you do. You're a PR master, but that's what I'm looking at with this thing.
I personally have already reached out to try to interview one or two of the girls from the show on my podcast next week and drop it the same time as the show releases. And just so there is another point of view. And,
have they responded back?
So not yet, but so one of the girls on the show is one of my good buddies. It's his daughter.
Okay.
And I happen to know two of them, so I know I can get it set up. But I just, through my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask you some tough questions, and, you can give your side, but I'm going to come back with my side as well.
So a lot of our viewers might even not know what's going on with this, because like I said, most of our audience is a little older like me. Can you describe what the show is and what's happening? Because like I said, a lot of people might not even know about it.
So months ago, my buddy told me, he said, hey, my daughter's going to be on this show. It's about Mormon wives. And that's all he really told me. And then the preview came out a little bit ago and I watched it. And it was like this whole thing about, we had to get married super early and we're swingers. And, it was all these relationships that were just, they were doing all these sexual things and acting out because, the church was so strict or they were so hard on us and we wanted the exact opposite and stuff. And it's not really, I wouldn't even call it, the Secret Lives of Mormon Housewives. I'd just say, hey, these are Utah County wives. Really, really is what it is. Because, Mormon happens to be there, but it's not really the focus of the show.
So I want to go to 3 Nephi chapter 1, verse 30. And it says, and thus were the Lamanites afflicted also, and began to decrease as to their faith and righteousness because of the wickedness of the rising generation. And I am concerned about the rising generation and the impact the rising generation is having on their parents, and how the rising generation may be bringing their parents, taking parents away from the church. And we've seen this even with David Archuleta. And so I pray for David. I love David Archuleta. I love his music. I don't agree with his choices. That's okay. But I pray for him that he'll come back and whatever. But I'm seeing that rising generation having an impact and influence on their parents. And I'm hoping, I don't know how this guy that's your friend is, I don't know if he's active or not active, but I don't know how this is impacting with his daughter being on there. I don't know how this has impacted him. And I don't know if you're willing to even speak on that, but I am curious.
I haven't really talked to him about it. I'm almost interested to see if all of this stuff coming out is going to be news to him. Because from what I'm getting, it doesn't sound like the stories they're telling are stuff that people would share with their parents. And so, you got to look at, I'm also wondering, how much money did these girls all get paid to be on this show? Because there's no way that
anything in this world with money.
Yeah. Or a little bit of fame.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. We've covered a ton of topics that a lot of people aren't willing to talk about. So Jeffrey, David, thank you guys for being vulnerable and talking about this. For Trevor and I, we're two white dudes that grew up in the church, and We've had a pretty typical LDS life. And so, what you guys have dealt with and gone through, man, it's pretty cool to see that you've stayed strong and true. And I truly believe that the leaders of our church are guys like you, Jeffrey, and like you, David. I believe that is the future. And I think we will see that. I think we will see the last being the first. So, guys, any final thoughts as we wrap up? Trevor, David? Okay.
No,
Jeffrey, thank you so much for jumping on with us. This was an awesome episode. We covered some pretty intense topics, including the TikTok show that's coming out, or the Hulu show. And so we're excited to continue to do stuff with you as fellow LDS content creators and continue to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is what it's all about. For myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For Trevor Keys and David Douglas, and for Jeffery Mann, we'll see you guys next time.
In the heart of Zion, where the truth shines bright, we gather the stories, bring the shadows to light. From the ancient prophets to the visions anew, we're here to explore, to learn, to renew. Zion Media, where the journey begins, unlocking the mysteries, where the Spirit wins. From the mountains of Mentina to the city of light, we're guiding the seekers through the darkest night. With the words of the prophets echoing in our soul, we dive into the scriptures, seeking to make us whole. From the plains of America to the temples on high, we uncover the secrets as the eagles fly by. Zion Media, where the journey begins, unlocking the mysteries, where the Spirit wins. From the mountains of Mentina to the city of light, we're guiding the seekers through the darkest night. With the words of the prophets echoing in our soul, we dive into the scriptures, seeking to make us whole. From the plains of America to the temples on high, we uncover the secrets as the eagles fly by. Nothing will be withheld from them for those who seek and strive. With hearts full of truth, we rise again. Zion Media, keeping the faith alive. Zion Media, where the journey begins, unlocking the mysteries, where the Spirit wins. From the mountains of Mentina to the city of light, we're guiding the seekers through the darkest night. Join us in the quest, where truth is our guide. In the arms of Zion, we stand side by side. Zion Media, where the story is told, bringing forth the wisdom, both ancient and bold. Join us in the quest, where truth is our guide. In the arms of Zion, we stand side by side. Zion Media, where the story is told, bringing forth the wisdom, both ancient and bold.